Welcome to the webinar on getting effective letters of recommendation for your Fulbright application. I'm Jenny Sullivan. Letters of recommendation are very important pieces of your application for the Fulbright because they come from credible sources, usually academics, and the people on your screening committees are made up of academics, and they really trust the opinions and views of their colleagues in the field. And they're also a great way to discuss or give credence more towards things that aren't reflected necessarily on your transcripts or um, in your other places in your application, such as your character, your maturity. This is why they're very important. I want to clarify really quick before we move on, and I talk about this a little bit later, but to make a clear distinction between the types of recommendations that are necessary for students applying for the research or study awards versus the recommendations that are required for the English teaching awards. Students applying for the research/study awards must receive actual letters of recommendation on letterhead. To be clear, your referees who will write the letters on letterhead and sign them will actually upload them to your application themselves. You will never see the letter unless they choose to share it with you. But it is a formal letter on letterhead. Those applying for the ETA, you do not receive formal letters. Your referees actually log into your application in Embark, and they fill out a questionnaire about your skills and experiences and abilities. The questionnaire asks things like describe the candidate's communication style and skills, or describe their ability to act as an ambassador for the U.S., their maturity level, and things like that. But from now on throughout the webinar, when I talk about your referees, or if I say letters of recommendation, I'm really talking about both types of recommendations. So who should you ask? Well, first it should be, and most importantly, it should be someone who knows you well, someone whom you've built a relationship with. Maybe you've had a couple classes with, you've performed well, maybe you worked on a research project with them, somebody who can speak to a well-rounded sense of who you are and what your skills are. It should be someone, it will be even stronger if your letters or responses are from someone who has knowledge of your subject area and or research. So they can say, so the candidate is proposing to do an archaeological project in this particular country using this technique or working with this group of people. I have done that myself, and so I know details about what the student needs to be successful, and the student has those skills. That can be very powerful. It can be also, it doesn't have to be, but it can be someone who has knowledge of your host country. Somebody who says, this student is proposing to go to South Korea. I have been there many times. The candidate and I have had many conversations about the culture, about how to adapt, and I think they're well equipped and well prepared to go to this particular country. That can be very powerful as well, but it should always be someone who knows you well. That should be prioritized first. Your priority is always going to be professors. The more that they are full tenured professors with PhDs, the better. You might also reserve one of your three for a co-op supervisor or an employer. If your job is in your field, or maybe a very strong mentor. For ETAs, you have a little bit more flexibility. You might be able to ask an academic advisor or an advisor for a club where you sit on a leadership board, a coach, maybe someone has knowledge of your teaching experience or who was themselves a Fulbright fellow and can speak to their knowledge of what the Fulbright is all about and your qualifications for the Fulbright. Unfortunately, research and study applicants, yours are strictly professors and maybe one employer. So it's important for you to build a relationship with your referees because you will get a stronger letter if you do. In addition to having a stronger relationship with your referee, there's other benefits such as, receiving their advice or opportunities from them for professional movement or academic choices that you make. These would just become strong mentors. So how do you build a relationship with a referee? Well, relationship building takes time, so start early. If you haven't already, start now. Do research on your mentor. Demonstrate a connection. So look on their LinkedIn page or look at their CV. And the more ways you can find that you connect personally and professionally, the more you're going to have in common and the stronger your bond will be. Have regular meetings with them and communicate with them regularly. It doesn't mean you have to pester them weekly, but meet during their office hours or take them out to coffee once in a while, but maintain that communication. Ask for their advice on anything from your on research you're conducting, on graduate schools you might be considering, professional associations that you should join, or readings that you should do that would really strengthen your professional growth and academic growth in general, not just your Fulbright. Understand the criteria that you will be evaluated on by the Fulbright committees and address it with your mentor. So if you think you're weak in one area, make sure you have some of those conversations. And then remember, everything you do or say is fair game for the letter. So if you're routinely late for your meetings, that's going to affect the character portion of your letter, or how committed the referee is to even writing you a letter in the first place. How should you ask for the letter? Well, you should do it professionally. You should, if you're going to do it in an email, make sure it's a professional communication. Make sure you provide, and this is a little bit further down on this list, but provide at least a month, or do it in a timely manner so that they have plenty of time and you're not asking at the last minute. A good way to ask is to say, do you feel you know me and my project well enough to write a strong letter of recommendation for the Fulbright? If they say no, you might be able to send them some materials or have some conversations that reinforce their confidence in you as a candidate and help them understand your project even more, and will receive a stronger letter. I would suggest that you provide them with instructions, clear instructions, and supplementary materials. We'll talk about what some of those are that might help them create a stronger letter. And discuss the confidentiality. It's not expected that a referee ever have to share their letter with you unless they feel comfortable about that. There are a few reasons why a referee might say no. It could be straight up that they just can't positively support you. I'd much rather have a faculty member say to you, I'm sorry, I cannot write you a letter. I don't feel comfortable writing you a letter. That's good feedback for you. It also prevents you from getting a poor letter. A poor letter is going to be more damaging or a weak letter to your application than if you were to ask somebody else. They might say no because you've asked in an unprofessional manner or not given them enough time. They might say no because they feel that they don't know you or your project well enough. Or they might feel unqualified, it's beyond their scope of expertise or their title. Those would be good reasons for them. Maybe they know better that they would not be sort of have the right credibility that somebody else might have. It's always better that they say no honestly instead of getting a poor letter and give you an opportunity to ask somebody else to write a strong letter for you. Strong letters are going to provide context for how the referee knows you, the student, and their area of expertise. So it's really building the credibility and why the audience should listen to this referee. If they have known you, if they can say and speak to the fact that they've known you for a couple of years, or that they have the expertise in the area that you're going to be conducting research in or studying in, those are going to be strong, credible referees. They should address the criteria required, meaning they should talk about you and your skills as it relates to the project and where you're going, and relate to specifically what Fulbright wants in a letter, not necessarily what a grad school wants in a letter or another fellowship is looking for. They should be personalized. They should be about you, not about themselves. We see a lot of letters actually that spend 3/4 of the letter talking about the faculty member and then might have one paragraph about you. They should be personalized to you, not generic, not something where you could insert another student's name and it would be very similar. It should provide very specific examples. If they're going to say this student is great at research, they should give an example of a research project you worked on and what your role was and how you performed in that. And they should be honest and sincere, and that means it may include minor criticisms, but help give a well-rounded picture of who you are as a person. Weak letters are basically going to have the opposite of all of those. They're not going to address the criteria necessary, specifically that Fulbright is looking for. They're going to be generic or not tailored. They're going to be weak letters are ones that summarize or reiterate information available elsewhere in your application. Maybe they've just looked at your resume and listed all of your accomplishments. That's nothing new. They might include cliches or unsubstantiated praise or unclear criticisms. Or there might be errors or format issues and misspellings. This is the most common issue that we see in letters of recommendation or recommendation responses. In general, you should give at least a month, as I mentioned, for your referees, especially during the summertime when faculty are traveling or they might be on sabbaticals or doing research trips themselves. You want to give them some time. Claire and I are going to provide you with a letter of instructions for with some best practices, with what Fulbright's all about, what they're looking for, and with how to submit the letter. This is very, very important that you provide this directly to your referees. It's also very important that you read this letter yourself and are very familiar with the process so that if faculty members have questions, you can answer them or direct them to me and you. I'm going to talk about what's included in this letter and the submission process a little bit more in just a second. You might also provide resumes, transcripts, a copy of your essays, an outline of your research proposal to help referees craft strong responses. And then I would always recommend that you send a thank you letter to them afterwards and keep them updated on your progress throughout the application. If you're recommended, if you win, these are your fans. These are people who really champion you and should be involved in that success. As I mentioned before, and I want to reiterate, those who are applying for the research or study grant, your letters of recommendation are actual formal letters on letterhead from the organization. They should be addressed to Dear Fulbright Selection Committee. It should include the referee's signature and title at the bottom. They're typically 1 to 2 pages single-spaced, and they're actually uploaded online to your application by the referee themselves. For English teaching assistants, yours is actually a form filled out online by your referee. I recommend that they formulate their responses to these questions offline, maybe on a Word document, and then cut and paste those into the form. Here's a submission process, and it can be a little bit complex, so hear me out. You are working on your application in Fulbright's online application portal called Embark. You have a login username and password. You can log in and log out as many times as you want to work on your complete application. Well, on one page in your Embark application, it's going to ask you for the names of your referees, your 3 referees, and their contact information, their email addresses. Once you submit that information in your application, it's going to kick an automatic email to your referee that gives them their username and password for logging into your application and submitting their recommendation. Once they submit their recommendation, is very, very difficult for them to make changes or get it back or remove it. So once it's in, it's done. So I wouldn't recommend submitting your referees' names and email addresses in Embark until for sure you've had a conversation with your referees and they've agreed to recommend you. And until hopefully they've submitted a draft of their letter or responses to me or Claire to look over. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in just a second. But that should be closer to the end of the process so they know what to watch for and how to submit their responses. So your referee is going to write their recommendation and or their responses, and they're going to send a version of it to me and Claire. We're going to take some time to review the letter or their responses on a Word document to look for grammatical errors. We're going to make sure it addresses the criteria. We might even do things like say, we've seen the other letters of recommendation and they really address the student's research abilities, but what's missing from the overall application is a discussion about the student's ability to really be an ambassador for the U.S. in their character. Could you speak a little bit more about that? And if the faculty member is open to the feedback, they don't have to be, but if they are, and if they're in the spirit of they want you to be as successful as possible, then hopefully they'll be willing to make some minor changes and modifications before they actually submit their letter. Once we give them the okay, they're going to actually upload and or submit their final version in Embark before the Fulbright deadline in October. And again, once it's submitted, it cannot be altered. And the letter I'm going to provide for you is going to detail these instructions. So if you want to get a good, strong letter, I recommend these following tips. You might think about telling your referees who else is writing letters for you, and maybe if they're in the same department or maybe if they know each other, they might have a quick conversation. Hey, what are you writing about? I'm going to write about this, and that could be helpful. If your referees rely too much only on your application materials and not your relationship, the letters may all sound the same. So make sure they're talking about and you're choosing people who can speak to, like I said, your maturity and your character too. You should not draft a letter for a busy referee. If a referee says, I'd love to do that, you draft it, I'll look it over and submit it, that's really inappropriate and unethical. And if one suggests this, you should push back and or have me reach out to the faculty member or the referee and explain that that's not really appropriate and explain a little bit better what Fulbright is looking for. Our RIT Fulbright committee is made up of 5 or 6 faculty members who might be people you want to ask as references. That is fine. There's no conflict of interest there. They do this all the time. You should not, however, reach out to ask for one of the faculty members for a recommendation just because they are on the committee and you think they might have an edge, but maybe they know you less well than somebody else. That's not really appropriate. And you should have some alternate referees in mind just in case your original requests fall through. This is it. I hope this was helpful for you. Of course, as always, if you have any questions about letters of recommendation or your Fulbright application, please reach out to Claire or I. Have a great day.